We're very fortunate this morning to have with us Dr. Garland Landreth, and his research on meditation has been quoted by Deepak Chopra, and in the movie, which many of you have seen, What the Bleep Do I Know? For example, where meditation started, whole cities where the crime rate went down and so forth. So we are very lucky to have Dr. Landreth to be with us today and tell you all about that and the effects of meditation, and then he's going to do the meditation with us today. So will you please welcome Dr. Landreth.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. You get to talk now? Ready to go? Okay, good, perfect. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Reverend Mary Beth is a delight. I've met a lot of ministers. I've done over 200 Unity churches across the United States, and she lives it. She walks the walk, and I can tell, the way she comes across. It's her air is just enlightens the whole atmosphere around her. She lights up the room. So I'm excited to have you here and be here. But there's been a whole bunch of amazing people in this church. I'm really excited. I've wanted to come here many years, but I'm glad I finally made it. Now today we're going to talk about miracles. And scientists hate the idea of miracles, because when a miracle happens, it breaks the law of nature. But the truth of the matter is that miracles happen all the time in quantum physics. Let me give you some examples. We all know an object can't be in two different places at the same time, right? You're right. It can. When an electron is circling an atom, if nobody's watching it, it magically turns into energy waves, so it's everywhere at once, okay? We'll come back to that in just a second. A bigger one, Einstein's law of relativity. The number one rule of the law of relativity is nothing can go faster than the speed of light. In 1931, two very famous physicists by the name of Schrödinger and Heidelberg proposed a theory called quantum entanglement. That is, if you have a couple electrons circling an atom, they become quantumly entangled, which means beyond time-space limitations. And if you pushed on one of them, the other one would instantaneously go in the exact same direction. In fact, so instantaneously, if you were to measure the time it took to get there, it's faster than the speed of light. Einstein hated that theory. At one point, he called it spooky action at a distance. In 1981, Einstein was proven wrong. They did find that the communication was faster than the speed of light. Then they redid the experiment a couple of years ago in the new cyclotron in Switzerland, and they found that not only did the two electrons communicate faster than the speed of light, it was 10,000 times faster than the speed of light. If you're going to break a law of nature, you might as well go all the way. However, the spookiest thing in physics is the idea that consciousness itself is the quantum field. This is huge. Now, many of you have seen the movie What the Bleep? And there was one scene they were shooting these little electrons through a slit, and they were lining up in the back wall. Well, they didn't do a very good job of explaining it, and it's kind of complicated. So if I tend to lose you, don't worry about it, because I'm going to make it real simple with some analogies. But basically, the bottom line is there was an eye watching, and the eye represented consciousness, or the observer. As long as the eye was there, then the electron stayed nice, neat little ball, and there was a nice little line of balls on the back wall. Now, when they took away the observer, what happened was there were 16 lines. How can one line turn into 16? Well, what they found was that when you're no longer observing, then electrons disappear into energy waves. In other words, matter and energy are intertwined. We're basically bundles of energy. But in order to locate the energy in time and space, there has to be consciousness. This is huge. It's like this. If you take a couple pebbles and you drop them into a pond, it produces waves. The waves hit each other, then they in turn produce new waves. And they produce new waves, and pretty soon you got 16 waves. So, in this situation, the electrons, when they turn into energy waves, they interfere with each other, because that's what energy waves do when they hit each other. They interfere. That's what caused the 16 lines. So, what does this all mean? Well, it means without consciousness, you can't have matter. Without matter, you can't have people. Without people, you can't have stars, you can't have galaxies, you can't have a universe. There has to be a consciousness which is observing energy waves to create particles out of them. And I think in a roundabout way, physics discovered God. But we also have consciousness. Is our consciousness the same as that consciousness that's creating the whole universe? Right. The Unity Church says so too. We call it co-creators. So what does the research say? Because I have a research background. Well, the research says yes, we can indeed create miracles. Now, I like to separate them out into 4 different groups. The first one is the prayer research, which, by the way, Unity Church has been an active participant. Those of you that have been involved with some of the most amazing prayer studies, and I'll talk about one of these in just a minute. But what really impressed me about Unity Church is they believed in their message so much so, they subjected it to scientific scrutiny by participating in prayer research studies. The second group of research studies is similar. This is the research studies that I was involved with. And what we did is we took groups of people meditating. We found that when they were meditating, the whole environment would improve. Crime rates would go down, auto accidents would go down, suicides would go down. And I was the first person to do any of these studies way back in the 1980s. We actually got it published in mainstream journals, even more amazing. And then the third group of research studies was the research studies done by accident that shows that we can know things before they happen. And the fourth group of research studies was the research studies done by Princeton that shows that consciousness can even influence machines. Far out kind of stuff. So let's start with the prayer research. Now, we're all familiar with the first prayer studies. The first prayer studies, they'd pray for one ward of the hospital. They wouldn't pray for the surrounding wards. And the ward they prayed for would get well faster, have less need for antibiotics, better quality of life, and in some cases less deaths than the surrounding wards. However, most scientists poo-pooed this early research. They said that what really was happening was the people doing the praying happened to pick the ward of the hospital that had the best doctors and best nurses. And the people doing the praying had an uncanny knack for figuring out which of those wards of the hospital had the best doctors and nurses. So this went on until about 1988, and then the first double-blind study of prayer was done. Double-blind is the Cadillac version of prayer. You kind of randomly assign people to groups. You pray for one group, you don't pray for the other one. They're randomly assigned throughout the whole hospital. So nobody can say one ward is better doctors than the other ward. And guess what? Same results as the other prayer research. And this went on, there hundreds and hundreds of studies have been done. Probably the most reliable research out there. They've only had 1 or 2 studies that haven't come out significant. So finally scientists said, okay, there is something to prayer. But what prayer really is positive thinking. Now, is prayer just positive thinking, or is it something else? Think about it. We all know the value of positive thinking, right? You can't be coming to this church without Reverend Mary Beth. You're always positive, right? Now, but is it just positive thinking, or is it something else? An interesting study was done. This was done by Unity Church, one of my favorite studies of all time, prayer study. And this was done in 1999. It was a triple-blind study. Now, what's a triple-blind study? Well, let's say I'm sick, and Reverend Mary Beth is praying for me, and I get well faster because she's praying for me. But she doesn't tell me. If she doesn't tell me, then I can't have positive thoughts about it. Does that make sense? So they did a whole study like this. They took 1,200 people that entered a hospital in Kansas City, which, by the way, is the home of Unity, and they prayed for half and didn't pray for the other half. And, of course, they were randomly assigned, and even the doctors and nurses didn't know they were being prayed for. And guess what? Same results as the other prayer research. In other words, it's not just positive thinking, because people didn't even know they were being prayed for. They still got the same results. This is mind-boggling. So they redid it, another experiment, triple-blind, on prayer. And this one was done in Columbia, New York. And this one had 2 interesting twists. It was people praying in America or people in Korea. So somehow the prayers had to go through molten rock and whatever else in the middle of the world and arrive at the right person in Korea. And then it was a women's in vitro fertilization clinic, women trying to get pregnant. And, of course, the women weren't told because of a triple-blind study. And guess what happened? The women who were being prayed for had a 50% greater chance of getting pregnant than the women who weren't being prayed for. It brings up a whole new dimension to the idea of immaculate conception, but we won't touch that one here. All right, so basically what I've done is talked about how prayer is a kind of one of those interesting kind of experiments that shows that our consciousness is interacting with the outside world. But here is the interesting thing. There is no electromagnetic field emanating from our brain that can account for this. There is none. Our electromagnetic fields from our brain are basically very weak. They don't get past our skull bones. So how can praying for somebody 100 feet away, much less thousands of miles away, work? It's one of those spooky action at a distance kinds of things. One of those quantum kind of things, beyond time-space limitations. The same with the meditation research. That was the research that I was involved with. And what we found is, again, groups of people meditating could make the world around them a better place to live in by reducing the negative influences such as crime, auto accidents, and even suicides. Unbelievable stuff. So by the time, what we decided to do, we'd already done about 20 of these studies. Every one of them came out significant. There wasn't one that didn't. So we knew it was working. We just had to get enough people there. So we decided to do a demonstration project in Washington, D.C. We took 4,000 transcendental meditators into Washington, D.C. and actually changed the crime rates while we were there. We told everybody in advance what we were going to do. That's how sure we were to work. We told Mayor Barry, he was a cocaine mayor. He had been rehabilitated, but we told him in advance. We told the police chief, told all the newspapers. And if it didn't work, they would have poo-pooed all of our other old research. But it did. And while we were there, people always asked me, how you did it. Well, we'd come in, we'd sit in a big, huge ballroom, all 4,000 of us. And we start meditating about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, go to about 1, and then we meditated from about 3 till about 7, 8 or 9 hours on the foam. We're sitting on foam. And people always say, well, how'd you do it? I mean, you must have been thinking about crimes. You can't reduce crimes without thinking about crimes, right? Make sense? You can't think about crimes. You have to think about crimes. How can you reduce crimes without thinking about them? Well, how about this? We never once thought about crimes. We never once thought about crimes. What we did is we got out of the way. We let the divine flow through us. Because when you want something, what are you attracting? Lack. You don't have it. Lack, you don't have it. One of my favorite quotes from Charles Fillmore, one of the co-founders of Unity Church: surrender the results. Surrender the results. Surrender the results. Throws away all that stuff about intentions. We got out of the way. We got out of the way. Because you can't get to the quantum by trying to get to the quantum. Even though it's everywhere, you can't try to get there. You have to slip into it. It's like you can't push out thoughts, because if you push out thoughts, it's another thought. You have to kind of let go. So this is surrendering to the infinite, surrendering to the quantum, surrendering to the divine. We add our power to the divine. So, brings us to the next interesting group of research. This one was actually done by accident. This is the research that shows that we can know things before they happen. And this study was done about 12, 13 years ago. And what they did was they took it was kind of a psychic study. They had a bunch of people in front of TVs. And every 8 seconds, a new photograph would come up on the screen. And the photograph is one of two different types: positive or negative. The positive ones are people in nature scenes. The negative ones are people in morgues, very gruesome ones. And all people had to do was guess in advance which photo would come up on the screen. They couldn't guess. But lucky for us, it wasn't the end of the story. Because the researchers decided to kind of hook people up to something called the GSR machine, which is similar to a lie detector. And what it does, it measures anxiety in the skin. So if a person is feeling anxious, it'll go up. So what they anticipated was, because the negative photos were so gruesome, that there'd be a spike of anxiety after the negative photo was presented. Well, guess what? When they did the data analysis, they found that there was indeed a spike of anxiety. But the spike of anxiety happened before the negative photo was presented, but not before the positive one. In other words, we knew in advance which photo was going to come up on the screen. Our body did anyway. Remember the old adage, I knew it in my gut? There's a lot of truth in that. So nobody believed the research, so they redid it again in a different laboratory. Same results. Then they looked inside the brain. The whole brain would light up about 4 seconds before the negative photo would be presented. And again, nobody did anything with this research because it was so far out. So finally, about 2 years ago, a very famous psychologist by the name of Dr. Ben, he's in every psychology textbook. I've taught a lot of psychology classes, and he's well known. He decided to revisit it. He did the experiment 10 times. 9 of them came out significant. And he decided to publish it in the Journal of Social Psychology, a very conservative psychological journal. They admitted it, but they had a big disclaimer at the top. Said, we don't know what's going on. I mean, how can you know things before they happen? That doesn't make any sense. But we're going to publish it anyway because this guy is world famous. But you're going to have to tell us what he did wrong because we can't figure out what he did wrong. We obviously did something wrong. So psychology is kind of in a little bit of a turmoil right now. Personally, I think it's a good thing. They're finally entering the quantum age, which is beyond, there are no limitations in time and space. It's huge. Now, the last group of research studies is the research studies done at Princeton. Now, these ones are even more far out. And their idea was, okay, if our consciousness is quantum-based, then if we have a machine which is quantum-based, maybe they can interact with each other. And that's what they found. So they made a machine which is quantum-based. They used cosmic radiation from outer space. Cosmic radiation is very, very reliable. In fact, you can run atomic clocks by it, and they're perfect. And so they had they had these machines that they designed, and the output from the machines was basically 1010, very reliable. Then they took college freshmen and had them concentrate on these machines to see if they could change the output from 1010 to 111 or 000 by concentrating. And after hundreds and hundreds of thousands of trials, they did indeed find a significant effect, but it was extremely weak. Personally, I don't know how they manage it. I remember when I was a freshman in college, I could barely get out of bed, much less somehow influence a quantum field random number generator. But they got these kids to do it. Then somebody had a brilliant idea. Let's put 4 or 5 of them together and see if the effect is magnified. And that's what they found. The more people doing it, the stronger the effect. So they put these machines all over the world. And what they ended up measuring is the collective consciousness of humanity. So every time we're together doing something, let's say we're watching the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, the machines go crazy. Instead of 1010, they do 111 or 000. We don't know which direction they'll go, but they'll do one or the other. Remember Katrina? Remember the other hurricanes, the tsunami, the OJ trial verdict? They have like 250 of these episodes where the machines went crazy during things we were all doing the same thing at the same time. Like the opening ceremonies of the Olympics. Billions of people watch those ceremonies. Machines go crazy during it. Well, the machines were there during 9/11. 2 amazing things happened during 9/11. First of all, the machines went crazy for 4 straight days. Nothing like that's ever been seen before. But the biggest thing was the machines went crazy 4 hours before 9/11 actually happened. That's before the terrorists even got in the airplanes. That's mind-boggling. In other words, we knew it was going to happen before it happened as a collective consciousness. This is huge. So, what I've done is I've outlined well over 1,000 studies, kind of give you a brief synopsis of general categories, that proves that our consciousness is indeed beyond time-space limitations. What are the conclusions we can make? Well, first of all, life after death. This is a big one. Life after death. This is huge. Humanity has always quested for this knowledge, for some proof that there is life after death. If our consciousness is not brain-based, if it's quantum-based, then when the brain dies, our consciousness doesn't have to die. This is huge. The second major one is we're all connected. We're all connected. Because in order for the prayer research, which Uni's been participating in, and my research to work, there has to be something inside of us that is extending outside and connecting with other people and having an influence on their consciousness. And makes sense, right? So we're all connected. This is huge. Jill Bolte Taylor, very famous neuroscientist from Harvard. She is well published. She had a stroke that shut down her left hemisphere. Instead of being in agony, she was in ecstasy. She had the traditional mystical experience. She talked about her stuff in the book, My Stroke of Insight. She's on TED, too. You can watch it tonight. She said that she felt, for the first time in her life after she had this experience, she wasn't alone. For the first time in her life, she wasn't alone. She felt connected with everybody. She was connected with everybody. Pretty amazing. Now, the third major conclusion is, together we can make a bigger difference than we can alone. When we come together and we meditate, we pray together, not only we're helping us, we're also helping the world. You don't have to change the outside world, you have to change your own inner war inside yourself. So many people today feel helpless. They feel they can't make a difference. And first of all, turn off the television. They're no longer news channels anyway. All they are is, it's all negative stuff. Just turn it off. You'll be much more happy. And you'll be able to tune into your positive stuff, which is going to make a bigger difference in the outside world than anything else we can do. And it is working. Already, I saw another poll on gay marriage. 65% are now for it. Just 2.5 years ago, 65% of us were against it, and all the presidents, ex-presidents were against it too. There's been a shift in the collective consciousness, and we're helping that shift along every time we come together and pray and meditate. It is huge. We're not helpless. We have to learn how to use and be without negative thoughts, because negative thoughts create realities that are more negative. So we have to stop the war inside of us, and then we have the power. We have the power. And that's, and then lastly but not least, everybody in here, one time or another, has doubts. Everybody. It is so refreshing to be living at a time when science is proving spirituality, and science is washing away these doubts. It's really a very exciting time to be around, especially a great time if you're a healer. Lots of things going on. Very exciting. Thank you again so much for inviting me. This has been a very special group. Thank you so much.